Alright, Michimotsu back for part 2 of my rebuttal to atheism as a religion, don't be fooled. I believe we were on part 7, and this is point 7, and this is where it gets a little more... Anyway, the claim he says is that apparently evolution, in summary anyway, he says that basically evolution can only be cogent if it has a belief in God, which is utter tripe, because essentially the guy is trying to advocate intelligent design, which again is utter tripe because of the fact that it is already validating a lot of things, particularly the law of parsimony. And yes, I know what that is. It's in the shortest thing, you have to rely on the most basic explanation, not on explanations that only require further clarifications, which is what you're doing when you try to bring in God to the argument, because any scientific person, regardless of their religious orientation, anyway, they're going to ask, well, can we scientifically analyze God? And if any Christian is saying yes, then they've pretty much shot themselves in the foot, because it would pretty much be saying God is physical, which they've already tried to claim very strongly that God is not physical. So, anyway, that's a whole other issue, but pretty much it's scientifically impractical because it already relies on something that cannot be scientifically proven, which the Christians will admit. But I would leave this guy's ignorance of evolution versus cosmology versus abiogenesis aside, but he forgets that evolution doesn't say anything about the Big Bang, it doesn't say anything about something coming from nothing, it doesn't say anything about life coming from non-life, which is for abiogenesis to concern itself with. Evolution is arguing and concerning itself with how species adapt and change in a myriad number of manners over a long period of time within different environments, but it does not say anything about how unlife will somehow create DNA or those sort of things, the proteins, the RNA. It doesn't say anything about the singularity and how the explosion suddenly starts the planets revolving, as it were, or starting to coalesce into little planet balls. But if this guy wants to try and bring up the evolution topic, maybe he should fraternize with the enemy a little bit in order to actually figure out what the heck he's talking about, because he doesn't seem to actually understand that even though evolution is dependent upon physics and biology, but it's not by any necessity dependent on God, because that only presumes that evolution is some sort of religion or system based upon faith claims, when, if anything, the guy seems to be forgetting that this type of science, especially, even in terms of something that's related very much to biology, which is a science based on very deductive aspects of analysis, with evolution, a lot of times we're having to make inductive claims because, unfortunately, we don't exactly have what these strict Christian intelligent design people are looking for as transitional fossils. But if anything, I think the biggest problem here is that any Christian is defining God in such a way that they say it's just the way God is, God can't be confronted by science, and pretty much it says, well, okay, I can believe in God, but I can also believe in science, even though you're trying to hold to one position, but then you are also holding to a concept that pretty much violates every other scientific position that you hold to be true, if only because you think that otherwise it doesn't make logical sense. When science, while it does concern itself with logic, it actually concerns itself more with the how rather than the why. And that's the problem when you get with a Christian saying, well, I have to know why these scientific laws are the way they are. Well, you're already barking up the wrong tree, to use a very cliche saying. But that's one of the bigger problems. You're misdirecting the entire argument and saying that you need God to actually make sense of the scientific laws. Well, in order to make sense of the scientific laws, we have to investigate them. We don't have to investigate their cause until there's reason to think that we need to investigate it. And I think I've already claimed this. And no atheist is going to claim a Christian believes God is physical. Not to mention Christian materialists are few and far between in the first place. I mean, there's a book called Beloved Dust, which I believe is by a Christian materialist. I haven't talked to the man about this in detail, but maybe I will soon. And now the guy gets on this lovely little tirade about why the secular humanists don't want creationism or intelligent design taught in the schools. And he says it's the reason is because they're afraid that someone's going to point out, well, secular humanism is a religion and Christianity is a religion, so we have to keep out secular humanism as well. Well, that would be a valid claim, except secular humanism does not religiously believe in evolution, because you can ask virtually any biologist. The minority that says that evolution is not proven to be either fact or theory in the scientific sense of the word are very much the minority, not to mention they usually are trying to avoid certain implications of evolution that would negate some of their religious beliefs. But if anything, creationism and intelligent design, as I've already pointed out, are negating any scientific position that is based on the law of parsimony. If you're trying to tell kids that, well, God did this in some way or another, the kids are obviously going to be asking, what do you mean by God? What about God in terms of science? If God can be determined scientifically, then doesn't that make God the same as the Big Bang and essentially reduce God to a physicist's worst nightmare in terms of certain problems? But it doesn't make God something that would be beyond a physicist's consideration, because it would be something under natural laws. But if you say it's not, then the kids are going to be saying, well, why are we even discussing this in a science class? And these are 15, 16-year-olds or so that are going to be already pointing out the blatant idiocy of such a position. But no scientist, as I've already said, is going to speculate about why the process is caused. They're going to investigate the process itself. But basically, it's not as if the secular humanists are going to be defending evolution religiously, because there's no need to. There's plenty of evidence, there's mountains of it. Many of the problems with it tend to be about confusion as to how science proves things, which, well, that can easily be remedied with certain little helping things. Alright, we're on the last page. And this is one of the trickier things, because in one regard it seems very logic. In one regard it seems very logic for him to say this. When he says there is a God, and then Richard Dawkins says there is no God, he says that, well, they haven't changed the subject. I'm not going to debate that part. I'm going to debate that negating a religious statement does not classify the statement as part of a larger religious tradition. Just because you have a bunch of people that say, well, I don't think there's a God, I don't see any reason to believe in a God, I don't have a God belief, it does not suggest that that itself is sufficient to be a religious tradition, because that would be equivalent to saying that not believing in unicorns is a religion, a unicornism. But in put it in more basic terms to Dr. Phil, atheism does not have a creed, humanism on the other hand does. Now, if you want to have some sort of debate, have a debate with someone about the premises of humanism. Research humanism, look into books, those sorts of things, because you've probably read books, those things that are made of paper and they're sewn together and they have the spines, anyway. But if Dr. Phil is already confusing atheism and humanism, then he's already failed in clarifying why atheism is wrong, because the real issue he has is with humanism. Atheism is incidental to humanism, and you don't have to be an atheist to be a humanist. You can be an atheist and be a Buddhist, you can be an atheist and be a Jainist, you can be an atheist and be a Hindu, even though that's technically a minority position within Hinduism. You can be an atheist and be a Satanist. In fact, that's probably the majority position. Anyway, probably getting to about, I'm going to have to get this into another part, but I'll see if I can get right to the point here. Now, I'm probably not going to be able to all stop about here. Buddhism is not always defined as a religion, even by Buddhist scholars, because many would argue that it's more philosophy than a religion, considering it's oriented towards your thought processes more than your practices, which are actually after the fact. But when he says initially Buddhists are atheistic, but then he says they're agnostics, and then he is trying to clarify it when there's no need to, because as I've already pointed out, atheism and agnosticism are not mutually exclusive. They pretty much rely on each other in order to survive and make a cogent system in order to talk about knowledge of God and belief as to whether there is a God. Anyway, I'll probably have to stop it right here. I hate to have gone on those little rants, but it would help to clarify. The next video is going to be pretty short, but you'll get to see more pictures because that's what I'm doing. When I'm putting these together in Windows Movie Maker, I'm just having these little wallpapers I found. Anyway, hope you enjoy this. See you later.